It had been a crazy day. Katie discovered that when Mom was to be somewhere early in the morning, it's the perfect day for cereal. Orbie found out that when Dad has a lot of work to do on a project, it's not a good time to ask about the position of the stars. And they both learned that having a jazz band in the living room is not a good idea when Dad has to concentrate. Dad asked Katie and Orbie to put all the instruments away. He needed quiet. And once they did, the house was quiet. For a little while. But then Orbie decided to be a very quiet tickle monster. He did tickle Katie very quietly. But she shrieked and laughed so loud that Dad walked into the room. Dad told them that he loved them very much, but he really desperately needed quiet in the house to finish his project on time. Katie and Orbie looked at each other. They thought they were being quiet. Dad said they were being wonderful, but the laughing and the shrieking was interfering with his concentration. He explained that Mom, perhaps, was more used to the noise, but he had to do his project his own way. And to do that, he needed a little less noise. Katie and Orbie could see the problem. Katie immediately came up with a brilliant idea. They would be quiet up in her bedroom, with the door closed. Dad gave both of them a hug, and he really appreciated their help. Well, the two friends tiptoed all the way up the stairs and into Katie's room. They closed the door ever so quietly and looked at each other. What could they play in her room that would be quiet so that Dad wouldn't hear them? Orbie suggested cards, so they played 3 games of Old Maid. When they were tired of that, Katie thought they should draw pictures. They got out the crayons, markers, pencils, and lots of pads with colored paper, and they both sat down to work right away. Nobody noticed when Orbie's foot kicked the Old Maid cards and spread them all over the floor. They worked so hard on their pictures that no one noticed that the markers had rolled all over the floor, too. Soon, Orbie thought of another fun game. Bedspread shapes. They could crawl under Katie's bedspread and make shapes. Katie loved the idea. To lift the bedspread up, they had to throw Katie's stuffies on the floor. They landed in several flops all over the crayons and markers and papers. Orbie made the first shape. Under the blanket, he was on his hands and knees, and he lifted his head up high and stuck one leg up. This really looked silly, and Katie laughed. Quietly, of course. Then it was Katie's turn. She stood up under the blanket, pulled one side of the blanket in, and crouched over into a little ball. She looked like a snail. Orbie tooted. Next, Orbie raised both his hands high in the air. And when they got tired of making shapes, Katie thought puzzles sounded like fun. Orbie agreed. They had to push aside some of the markers and cards and drawings to make a nice flat space for their puzzles. And they were so eager to have some quiet fun that they didn't pay any attention to the fact that slowly but surely, Katie's room was getting messier and messier and messier. By the time Dad was finished all his work and was ready to start dinner, the two friends had also built a block gas station and a huge traffic jam with all the cars and looked at several picture books. They had done almost every single thing they could think of that they could do quietly. Just as they were starting to feel like being noisy, Dad opened the door. He had a great big smile on his face, and he announced that everyone could be noisy again. Katie and Orbie cheered. They raced over to Dad, gave him a big hug for working so hard. Dad hugged them back, but that was when he noticed that the room was a terrible mess. Katie and Orbie turned to see what Dad was looking at, and for the first time, they noticed it too. Katie could see by his face that he was a little disappointed. He asked them if they would mind tidying up because he was tired and still had to make supper. Katie turned Dad around and told him that they would in no time flat. When he closed the door, all kinds of strange noises and thumping and bumping came out of the room. Downstairs in the kitchen, Dad wondered how all that thumping and bumping could possibly mean the room was getting tidied. In the bedroom, Katie was pretending to be a swooping, screeching hawk. She would swoop down and pick up a block in her talons and then drop it on the shelf. Orbie was a vacuum cleaner and pushed all the puzzle pieces and the cards to the right box. He made a really loud vacuum cleaner noise. Of course, all this was mixed with a whole lot of giggling and laughing. In the kitchen, Dad looked up at the ceiling. He had asked Katie and Orbie to clean up, and now it sounded like they were making more of a mess. Once dinner was in the oven, he climbed back up the stairs to investigate. He knocked on the door, but a loud whirring noise from Orbie made it impossible for anyone to hear. So Dad opened the door. He began to say that he'd asked the two friends to tidy up, and he'd really like them to get started. And then he stopped in the middle of his sentence. The vacuum cleaner was putting the last puzzle box on the shelf as the screeching hawk tidied up the last corner of the bedspread. Dad couldn't believe his eyes. Dad told them that he'd come to tell them to please start tidying up. Katie laughed. He was too late. As they all headed downstairs, Dad said that he hadn't expected to see a clean room when he opened the door. Katie threw her arms around him and got a piggyback ride all the way to the bottom. She laughed and told him that they were just doing their job, their own way. And Dad had to agree. They really were. And I'm sure you have fun ways of getting your jobs done, too. And I'll just bet they're amazing, just like you.